Well, joining us this morning is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, representing the same state as Senator Schumer. Good morning and welcome to the National News Desk.
Well, good morning. Great to be on.
What will it take at this point, do you think, to end the shutdown? And what's your message to your fellow New York lawmaker, Senator Chuck Schumer?
Look, it's going to take everyone in our communities to reach out to the Democrats, particularly Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and tell them enough nonsense. Let's get back to work. If you want to talk about these things that you want changed, if you want to spend more, if you want to, the American people to say, let's continue to bring in more illegal immigrants and continue to put them on our healthcare system and continue to burden our communities, then keep doing what you're doing. But I think people are recognizing that we need to slow down our national debt. We aren't cutting Medicaid. We're slowing down the growth of Medicaid over a period. But unfortunately, states like New York have spent enormous amounts of money. They keep saying, well, the federal government doesn't allow you to spend money on illegal immigrants. Well, technically, under the law, that's true. But what New York does is we spend $230 million a year just on illegal immigrants that are 65 and over under a special Medicaid program. We also spend over $1 billion each year on illegal immigrants who are under 65, who are receiving this through what we call the Essential Plan in New York. And that money is being subsidized by the federal taxpayers. So the federal taxpayers are actually paying for it. And what's worse in New York than any other state, which is why this is felt by local governments, is that the local governments still participate in paying 25% of the total Medicaid share. No other state in the country does that to their local taxpayers. And Jan, this is why it's so important. If you look at upstate New York and places where I live, our county pays among the highest property taxes based on a percentage of value because we have lower values in our property. So when everyone cries in Westchester and Long Island that their taxes are so high, they have very high values as well. So we're being higher taxed. And so that local share, we're paying for it. And when people are coming across the northern border, illegal immigrants in huge numbers like they have in New York, I have a border district, those residents are here and we're paying for them. Now, there's all kinds of ways that the Democrats have sort of used sleight of hand, that's a magic trick, by the way, to make taxpayers pay for this. But the New York taxpayers are going to be left on the hook as well. That's what Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are telling you. That's why we're trying to highlight that so people know the federal taxpayers are paying, but worse, our local taxpayers. And by the way, upstate New York is mostly, an agricultural community, small cities. We're the ones bearing the brunt of this. And these are the people that are most angry about the cost of Medicaid.
Explain why Democrats are saying this is a lie. Every time I hear a Republican say illegal immigrants are getting health care on the taxpayer's dime, families are now stuck with that bill. And you hear Senator Chuck Schumer, you hear Hakeem Jeffries say this is a lie. Why do they continue?
Well, they're lying. I mean, I used to sit next to Hakeem Jeffries in the state legislature. Okay, Democrats in the state legislature, especially the assembly, have always had, since 1974, have had just a massive majority. And so, we just sit there and, do what we can to fight them. They've never had tough races. They've never really had to stand up and tell the truth. They can just say whatever they want. And often the Albany media will go along with them because they have all the power. So here's Hakeem Jeffries, all of a sudden the minority leader of the most important legislature in our world, I would argue, and he's playing the same game that he played in the state legislature. This is the big leagues. You can't sit there and say with a straight face that the federal taxpayers aren't funding this. It has been reported even by the left, leaning, even the Albany Times Union, which is to me, a very far left newspaper, totally sucks up to the Democrats in Albany, let's be honest. And they have called this out and said, why are we doing this? Why are we allowing all of this money to go into illegal immigrants, into Medicaid, that is higher? So here's an example. Per capita, New York State, we pay more than California and Texas combined. We're an outlier. We're not in the norm. It's because we're gaming the system. But guess what New York also does that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are talking about? Their friends in managed care and health insurance are taking the chunk of money and they're reimbursing themselves with federal taxpayer dollars. Then that money goes to illegal immigrants. And by the way, under state law, even if the federal tax dollars don't cover it directly, they're paying for it indirectly. And by the way, even if it isn't directly, that money actually is required to be paid. So that means they're going to go back to the well, to the New York taxpayers, and make them pay for it. And look, most people don't really have a problem having a lot of our legal immigrants who are people, they can sign up for health care. They also can pay for it. They work at our farms and construction. That's one thing. But we have a high amount of people on the terror watch list that have come across the northern border. 90% of the people on the foreign terror watch list have come across the northern border from all over the world. You know, they're not just coming from South and Central America. They're coming from all over the world, dangerous people. But we also have cartel members that are hiding, within our communities. People that are child pornographers. You've seen rapes and murders. Laken Riley was released by her killer was released by the New York City police because he was required to be released and ended up killing her. This is what New York is tolerating, and this is why we have so much money spent. We're such an outlier compared to the rest of the country. And this is a problem, and this is why our taxpayers are just suffering.
So imagine if a Democratic socialist, Zohran Mamdani, gets to become mayor of New York City. How did New York City become a place where your two top mayoral candidates are Mamdani and former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo?
Yeah, not a good look for New York. But I'll tell you what's, I think, a big problem, and I think people don't realize that there's just the news media, and I'm talking about the mainstream media, really has not done its job, and there's so much apathy among voters. If you look and see, Mamdani won a very small percentage of the Democratic Party in order to win that primary. He really laser focused on the Democrat Socialist America, who are rising. There's not a ton of them, but they have a lot of money and energy. Mostly Mamdani's money is coming from outside resources. They've shown that and proven that. And he's able to win, overwhelmingly in these areas where we have this rise in this movement, which is really kind of disturbing because when you look, I served in the state legislature. I left in 2016 to go to Congress. But in 2016, there were no members of the Democrat Socialists of America. And I had Democrat colleagues and friends in the state legislature that were actually one of my good friends, Arabella Simotis. She represented the same district that Mamdani has. He won and beat her by a very narrow margin. They now dominate. So if a Democrat socialist is able to win in New York City, the largest city in the country, and really an important city for the economy of all of New York, not just the city, this is going to be extremely disruptive if he's able to carry out what he claims he wants to do.
And aren't you concerned there's
going to be outrageous?
Aren't you concerned
anti-Semitism?
That there's going to be a mass exodus, not just from New York City, but your state?
Well, we already have had a mass exodus. Under Andrew Cuomo, we had a mass exodus, which is why your point is that how do we end up with these two leading the ticket? It's because of apathy. It's lack of strength in the party. And it all comes back to two people. Who are the two most powerful people in our nation in the Democratic Party when it comes to the legislature? Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House. Two very weak leaders from the state of New York who have not stood up they've not stood up against the Democratic Socialists of America. They've allowed them to completely dominate and take over their party. Even though they're maybe not the majority, it's the tail wagging the dog. And then so many, and they've created this violent rhetoric, this anti-Trump rhetoric that anyone who doesn't agree with them is somehow a fascist. And now you have no alternative but to go for the Democrat Socialists because anyone that looks like Trump or agrees with Trump's populist message is a fascist and a person that not only needs to be shut down, but in many cases need to be eliminated. Look at Charlie Kirk. Look at the violence against the right. I mean, it's a scary rhetoric, and we have two weak leaders who will not stand up and will not take a stand for, say, the John F. Kennedy type of Democrats that mostly exist in New York. A lot of Democrats in New York are union members who don't want to adopt the socialist mantra. They're firemen, they're police. They don't like that.
Yeah.
But we're stuck with it because they have no choice. And now look at, you have our own governor, who's from upstate New York, has endorsed Mamdani.
So there's so much more to talk about this, and I hope to have you on again. But no, this was it was great to talk to you, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from the great state of New York, and we hope to have you back on again. We're running out of time, though. Thanks for joining us.